going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here with Mike Kaye for the latest episode of the No Huddle Show. Our first time recording from NovaCare in a long time. It's like the old days, you know?
Throwback.
Before we get into football, I should say, it seems like at the beginning of every episode, I happen to throw out a take about pop culture that angers people in the comments. So I thought I might as well just start throwing out takes every podcast. I don't have any controversial ones today. I will just say I started that show Chernobyl Chernobyl. Is it pronounced Chernobyl or Chur?
I thought it was Chernobyl.
Chernobyl. I watched the first episode. That show is intense. I know it gets a lot crazier from there. You guys are probably going to spoil it for me because I probably deserve that after the way I treated Game of Thrones so loosely.
And I started watching Good Omens, which I think is a really, really smart show that you should watch.
I'll be more negative next week so you guys can get mad at me.
Oh, we do need to talk about how terrible X-Men looks, but we'll save that for the end of the show.
All right, so more pressing news. We'll get into our observations from OTAs. Today is Wednesday. It's our last day the media is going to be able to see voluntary OTAs. I believe they have one more to go. It's a mandatory minicamp next week. We'll be there all 3 days. There's a lot to take in, but the most newsiest thing that I think we need to cover before we get into everything we saw is Malcolm Jenkins' update. Nothing's actually changed necessarily, but just he still hasn't shown up. I know it's not technically a holdout yet until it gets to mandatory minicamp. It seems to be blowing in the direction of him not showing up next week. They worked out Jonathan Cyprien. Doesn't seem like they're going to sign him. They signed some dude I've never heard of who I guess
Trey Elston.
Was on the Eagles at some point.
Yeah, he had a 10-day stint during the Super Bowl.
10 days. It's like a 10-day contract.
Yeah, Super Bowl run. Yeah.
Oh, wait, really? During 2017?
Yeah, so
what?
He played in one game in September and then was cut. He kind of did what Trey Sullivan did in week 1 of last year where he was on the roster.
Yeah, it was on the
immediately
practice squad or whatever.
Yeah, so...
Right. But anyway, so there was kind of some hubbub, and it was kind of based on the way Adam Schefter phrased his tweet. Because on the top of the tweet, you and I talked about this because we get notifications for all the Adam Schefter and all the other main guys, and so all we saw was Jonathan Cyprien working out for the Eagles, and then at the bottom of the tweet it says Malcolm Jenkins, no end in sight. You can't really put those two together unless you're saying they're connected. He went on the radio and said they weren't connected today. But the point being, he said that Malcolm Jenkins might not be around for a while. That could mean he's going to be back in training camp because that's not for another month and a half. But it is significant that he's going to skip minicamp because he's never done that in his Eagles career. So there's a stalemate at the very least.
Yeah, and I mean, you can understand, from our perspective, it's easy to say you need to pay that guy. But also, what are you going to pay the guy?
See, we don't know what he's asking for.
Right, and, you look at the top of the league, it's about 15, 16 million, in that range, and he is 31. And the logic for the Eagles here, if you didn't want to pay him, even if it was it wasn't a significant pay raise, is if you're looking at it where, you're thinking after 2020, you're probably done with him. He'll be 33, turning 33.
Having played every game.
Yeah, so, you've put a lot of wear in his tires, so do you want the dead money that you're going to create by giving him a signing bonus or giving him more guaranteed money or making him more flush? So that I understand. I mean, let's keep this in mind. This is a team that was willing to trade him for Brandon Brooks a few years ago. Or Brandon Cooks.
One letter off.
One letter off, sorry. We've been out in the sun for a long time. So they were willing to trade him for Brandon Cooks, and so clearly, yes. Is he one of the 3 most indispensable players on defense? Absolutely.
We both believe that, yes.
But he is on the wrong side of 30. The way this team has looked at things from a youth and aging perspective is they've signed older guys to very short-term deals. Obviously, he's not a homegrown talent. He was signed here, but he has been here long enough that you can consider him an incumbent guy and a tenured guy. And I think they need to do right by him just because he is so influential in the locker room. He is probably the most versatile player on this entire team. And he's local-ish, too. And I think,
North Jersey.
Yeah, I think you're everything you're looking at with him is positive. I don't think anything he does is negative because when you consider how much Jeffrey Lurie has supported his outside endeavors that are important to him and important to a lot of people in this country, it's hard to find a weakness or a bad point for him. You know what I mean?
So there's some irony in the fact that it was this day last year that they were supposed to go to the White House and then had their invitation rescinded. And I know Malcolm Jenkins wasn't the reason, but he was like at the charge of, he was like the first one to be like, I'm not going. It's funny how he's not here now and they didn't, I don't know. But, I wrote something like going through all the possible scenarios from the way this can play out, from the very simple, he's here next week, to the extreme where he's traded or released, which I don't think it would get to that point unless it was like a serious like ill will on both sides. I don't know what kind of value you could get. It's like he's like an interesting case trade wise, but they're not going to trade him. But the realistic scenarios are: one, he comes back next week, which I don't think he does. Two, he doesn't come back next week and he comes back in training camp, which feels like a possibility, if not what will happen, because he'll lose like $80,000 if he skips all 3 days next week. It's like gets progressively more each day. And training camp, he would lose $40,000 per day. Like that, it's not the same as Le'Veon Bell, who wasn't technically under contract, so he wasn't being fined.
Right.
Like, and I think you pointed out to me that what teams will do is after they sign a new thing, they like retroactively either give him the money back or don't force him to pay it or whatever. But if they don't give him that money, then he's gonna be losing it. So
I would be surprised if he holds out in the camp, because I think something has to get done in the next month. It has to.
Then the worst case in this scenario would be he holds out throughout training camp into the season, which that can't happen from either side, really. Like, that player, as great as he is at taking care of himself on his own, like, you need to be around the team.
Yeah, and I mean, safety is such an interesting position too, because you're part linebacker, part corner, you're playing multiple spots, you're asked to do a lot, and it's hard to just get that game speed right away. And I think he's going to need those joint practices against the Ravens. He's going to need preseason. Yeah. So, like, it's not just practice with your buddies. It's you need to be here for reps. And I think, not that anybody's going to, supplant him in his role if he's gone, but, his absence and Roddy McLeod's absence as he recovers from season-ending knee surgery has allowed, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but has allowed some of these younger guys.
They have some young guys up there.
And Andrew Zendejo to get some pretty valuable reps. Yeah, he will be known as the Night King on this podcast.
He had the mask in his locker.
Yeah. Well, I saw him walking around like with a
he's a face. He's just an angry guy. I mean, we're gonna be honest.
He's a fun fella.
Fun guy. But yeah, so all right, we can get into OTAs. As you mentioned, Jenkins wasn't here. There's more guys that weren't here on it's not the last day, but one of the last days. Deshaun Jackson wasn't here, Nelson Aguilar, which kind of ties into...
So, with that said, Nelson Aguilar was in the locker room. Yeah, he was in the locker room,
so he was in the building. And I saw Lane Johnson the other day, so it's not like these guys are just not around.
I saw Jalen Mills, too.
Jalen Mills was there today. So, a lot of guys weren't on the field, but, the receiver thing is important. We'll talk about Wentz first, because he's kind of the big story, obviously, this time of the year.
Is he?
He's been through 9 practices and has come out unscathed, which is a positive sign. This wasn't his best practice, but he had all backup receivers with him. The number one receiver is J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and he looked the part, actually. But I don't know how much of his inaccuracy and all that was him, and how much of it was like a lack of timing with these other guys, and they're not in the right spot. Like, it wasn't his best day, but it's nothing to be worried about.
Yeah, you and I both wrote he showed some hesitation throwing the football. There were some double pumps and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but you don't have you don't have the trust, you don't have the communication that you normally do. Like, people always are like, oh my god, these guys are sprinkling in first team reps. Those are really valuable because timing is a thing. And, Charles Johnson's the only guy that's been getting regular reps with the ones. Like, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside's been in and out, but, like,
mostly red zone, yeah.
Right. Charles Johnson's been Alshon Jeffrey's, like, replacement, I guess you could say.
That's, for a guy fighting to be on the roster, that's big.
Yeah, it is. And I thought he was going to make the roster to begin with, but, that's been an encouraging sign.
Especially Mac Hollins is still... He's been running on the field, actually, so he's alive,
Let's save the Mac Hollins conversation for later in the podcast. But,
But, to expand on your point about like them needing to build that chemistry. Like I even asked JJ Arcega-Whiteside because he had another great red zone catch today from Nate Sudfeld this time actually. It was a fade in the corner. It was beautifully thrown. I mean, Arcega-Whiteside did most of the work in reality. Like it was just again, I'll keep pounding the table for him. Like he's gonna play. He needs to play week 1 red zone packages. But I pretty much asked him like how important it is getting these reps with Carson, especially with all the guys out. Because you need to have those plays, you need trust with the quarterback more than almost any other play, really. Because he's kind of throwing it up and you're going and getting it. And he said he and Carson have spent a lot of time. He says anytime after a play, Carson will pull him aside and he like goes over things with him. I think this is really valuable time right now for this kid. And then once Alshon Jeffrey gets in the mix, he's going to have all these veterans around him. He has a very bright future, and a lot of it has to do with like everything around him too.
Yeah, I think a lot of our fellow media members have really bought into him. And it's easy to see why. I'm really interested to see about him against press coverage and pad practices. Yeah. I want to see him be tested. But yeah, the early results are very, very positive. If you're an Eagles fan, you should be very, very excited.
It's funny because in the moment on the draft pick, I think we're all like, huh. Because it's like they were working out all slot receivers and speed guys, and then they drafted a guy who's kind of not polar opposite, but he's pretty different than the guy. We hadn't really heard them tied to him very much. And now, when you think about it, it kind of makes a lot of sense because now, like, how are you defending this offense in the red zone? Dallas Goedert looks huge, and we've raved about him enough on this with Zach Ertz, Alshon Jeffrey, even Deshaun Jackson has a little speed element that you can have there, like Jordan Howard.
I think you could feel pretty comfortable about saying that Dallas Goedert's upside projects him higher than even Zach Ertz.
Upside. Okay, he's better now than Zach Ertz was as a rookie.
Oh man, it's not.
Or a second year, I should say.
It's like
Zach Ertz took a little while. Yeah, he's already there.
Especially blocking and like dependable hands wise, he is on another planet from Ertz as a second year player.
And anything else you saw today that stuck offense wise?
So I thought that. They did a really good job of swing passing to running backs. Like, it wasn't just like a dump off. They were catching the ball in stride out in front of them.
A lot of Boston Scott reps.
Yeah, Boston Scott.
They're giving him a chance at least. I don't know if he's really shown anything.
I mean, here's what I'll say. If Josh Adams is on the field and taking part in reps, I'm not sure we see as much Boston Scott.
I think they want to see what they have.
Same with Miles Sanders. So Miles Sanders hasn't been around.
This is Boston Scott's time to like show why he belongs. I don't know if he's done enough to say he's going to be on the team yet, but
right. I mean, this is a 3-way battle in my opinion. Boston Scott, Josh Adams, and Wendell Smallwood
for number 4.
Yeah, who we'll talk about. I've got a lot to say about him later, but. Yeah, I mean, I think the running back receiving issues are a little bit overstated. Scott can catch the ball. Jordan Howard's pretty consistent as a receiver.
He hasn't dropped it at all.
Yeah, I mean, and he looks comfortable catching it in stride. So I don't buy that narrative. I mean, there have been people that have talked about, hey, they need a running back. Some guy suggested that Darren Sproles would be a home run. Another media member that will not be named said that he was going to be it's a home run, why wouldn't you bring him in?
Because of everything he's shown the last 2 years?
Because I watched practice, the 4 open practices, and have seen guys play very well.
And Sproles was not himself last year.
He was not.
It still wouldn't shock me if they signed Sproles back.
Well, and even
I don't think they will, but it wouldn't shock me.
And even if you are going to sign him, why sign him now?
Yeah, you might as well see what you have in these guys.
Yeah,
you know what Sproles is.
Give him the reps.
And he's 35, by the way, and he's 5'6".
And Miles Sanders can catch. Like, we really haven't gotten to see any Miles Sanders.
That's gonna be big for Miles because he was targeted a little bit his last year at Penn State, but not like
24 catches, I think,
which isn't a crazy amount, and it wasn't like for many yards. So it's going to be big for him in training camp to show that. They've been hesitant with him. What's his injury? A hamstring? Yeah, and they had a lot of issues with the hamstring, and especially Sproles actually.
Well, and you look at
this time of the year, like don't risk anything.
Yeah, soft tissue injuries, they ain't nothing to mess with.
Yeah, they're looking at those more intensely. I think this year after everything they went through. Defensive side of the ball. They went with Devontae Maddox in the nickel again. Sidney Jones outside, Razul outside. I'd say Sidney has had really good OTAs. The funny thing is, like, I feel like we haven't maybe said Devontae's name that much, but that almost is like an underrated good thing because that means he hasn't been getting burned at all too. Mm-hmm. But so I think Sidney Jones has been really good. DeAndre Hall has had the last 2 practices we saw. He's been the best safety.
Yeah.
More playmaking.
I would say this week, yes, he's been the best safety.
Yeah, this week, the last two. Yeah.
Which is crazy because he played a handful of snaps last year.
I've made cracks to a few people like, oh, he's kind of the guy who forgets on the team, and there's always a guy like that kind of winds up being a summer star. So
he had a nice little scrum today.
Yeah, I was there.
They call that the Boston Scott. He's looked good. Jeremiah McKinnon is a guy.
He's kind of sneakily just showed up on a lot of plays. Yeah,
he and Josh Hawkins have both played very well. This is a very deep cornerback group. I think we the national media clearly overlooked a lot of players on this in the secondary. I mean, they're getting back. I still
see people doing that. I keep people I've seen grades for the off season. It's the Eagles still didn't add a top flight corner. There's 4 top flight corners in the NFL. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's tough to do that, and I think, too, when you look at Hawkins and McKinnon, this is the perfect situation because if you've got Crabon LeBlanc, McKinnon, and Hawkins all pushing those first 5 guys, it makes another guy expendable. And so, who are you going to start a corner? It's wide open. Darby's going to be a starter. And I think that's locked in.
I think maybe Mills isn't as 100% as we once thought.
Right.
Mainly because of his foot injury, honestly.
Just thinking on it, I think Darby is guaranteed a starting spot. If Avante's not the third safety, he is the starting nickel corner. Done. It's over.
And then Sidney probably, right?
Yeah, either Sidney or Rasul or Jalen Mills. That's the thing.
So in our head, those 3 are fighting for the other outside spot.
Right. Cravon's going to be the backup nickel.
I think they want Sidney to win the job.
Yes.
I would say they want Sidney to be that guy. Whether he's there in a few weeks in the season or whatever, we'll see.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. So we pretty much covered a few of these guys, but who are... So we've covered Cindy Jones, DeAndre Hall, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, Dallas Goedert. Who's somebody else that stuck out to you?
I think Rasul Douglas has really held his own on the outside.
Secondary. That's 3 secondary guys.
Yeah,
they're in good shape there. Yeah. Good shape.
I think he's done pretty well. He had an interception today off an overthrow by Cody Kessler. He's shown very good awareness and body control. The secondary coaches have really praised him quite a bit when they've pulled him off to the side. I'd say another guy who's really impressed me, who I thought probably was on the outside looking in, is Nate Gerry.
I knew you were going to say him. Yeah.
Nate Gerry.
He batted down a Carson Wentz pass at the line of scrimmage today.
Yeah, he's looked really good. He looks very confident. He looks noticeably bigger, and I talked to him about that. He said he wanted to get bigger, playing middle linebacker, being on the inside. He's a wild card to me because he's the guy that I think with Zack Brown playing second team reps, I don't want to get too ahead of it. I think we were a little presumptuous with how we thought Zack Brown was going to just come in and be the alpha.
There's a reason why he was a free agent as long as he was.
Right. And I think he's going to be I think he's going to be a base formation guy. But I could see Nathan Gerry being a 3-down dude. I mean, the way that he's played, there's no contact, but he looks like he's in the right spot at the right time. He looks very confident. He's been calling all the plays as a middle linebacker. I'm interested to see where we've only seen him in 3 practices because he missed the second one, but he's looked good.
Yeah. And I would say a guy maybe a little under the radar I think that has just looked good in terms of how he's moving is Vinny Curry to me.
Yeah.
I didn't notice him as much today, but it's hard to notice the defensive linemen in general, although they did get a lot of pressure on Nate Sudfeld today, which probably is more offensive line based than defensive line. But Vinny Curry just looks like he has the athleticism and the movement that he had a couple years ago, and I don't think he had that last year. He's banged up. He wasn't in a good system that fit his talents. If he can be, 85% of what he was 2 years ago, then he's a pretty good third defensive end.
Mm-hmm. Another defensive end who's fighting for a job is Josh Sweat. He has gotten 3 would-be sacks.
He did have contact with Sudfeld on one of them, which is a no-no.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was his fault or not.
Yeah, look, the dude is showing good bursts. He looks smooth. He's a guy that if he can play at not even a Chris Long level, even under a Chris Long level, you're going to have some drop-off. He's inexperienced, but he's so athletically gifted, and you can do so many things with him. I think he could be a real asset. I think you can use him to stunt in very obvious passing situations. I think he's going to be a good player.
All right, so we've been mostly positive. Let's go negative. Who's the guy, you kind of mentioned him earlier, who's your guy that maybe should be worried about his job?
Wendell Smallwood.
Yeah. Again, we know we're overreacting to OTAs, by the way.
Right. He's had quite a few drops, which is a shame because he's probably, like, reputation-wise, the best receiving back of the group.
Yeah.
You don't have Miles Sanders here. You don't have Clement here, which you would think would be a positive opportunity if you could take advantage of it, but it also highlights your miscues.
If you mistake, yeah.
Yeah, and I just think, like, this is such a huge summer for him, and he hasn't had the juice. Boston Scott's outplaying him against air. But, they brought in two guys that knock him further down the depth chart. He played relatively well down the stretch for him. And I think the Eagles still thought they could upgrade over him significantly. And Corey Clement is going to be a key part of this offense. They like him. They've invested in him. He's cheap. And, you've got a guy in Smallwood who's entering the fourth year of his contract. They're not going to... It seems pretty evident they won't re-sign him. And so, maybe you shop him. I don't know if you can get any trade value for him. Maybe you trade him for, like, a guy who's going to get cut on another team. But... Again, I think he's a guy that really needs to step it up next week and then moving forward in training camp.
Yeah, I think that's fair. A guy I'm going to say hasn't practiced at all. We talked about him a little bit earlier. Jalen Mills, I think, has kind of been a loser of this offseason just because, those cornerbacks have gotten so much experience in his absence last year. His foot has lingered. I saw he declined to tell reporters how he was doing, which if he was doing great, he'd be like, yeah, I'm good. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's overanalyzing it, of course. But, he's just, these young guys just have a real opportunity. Like, he's entering the last year of his deal. Darby is and LeBlanc. And the three guys we've seen starting are, in theory, their future at corner in Rasul, Sidney Jones, and Avonte Maddox. And if they keep showing what they're showing, and if they start showing it once there's contact and once Alshon Jeffrey's here and all that, like... Mills might have a hard time getting on the field. I know Jim Schwartz loves him, which is the reason why he would get on the field. And the coaching staff really likes him. But if he's just not as good as the other guys, you have to have the best players on the field. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I'm sitting here right now today, I would put him 5th or 6th in the pecking order, like in terms of how I feel about these guys. Well, and I think he's a solid corner, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, and even as far as investment, when you look at him, he's a former 7th round pick. Yeah. I mean, they paid Ronald Darby. Rasul's a 2nd round pick. Avonte's a 4th round pick. Sidney's a 2nd round pick. So, did I say Rasul was a 3rd or
3rd? I think you said 2nd, but he's a 3rd.
He was a 3rd. Sorry. So again, it's sink or swim time for him, and he's not. He doesn't even have he doesn't have a life preserver on or anything.
He hasn't been on a football field since London. He hasn't been on a field in America since week 7.
That's funny. Yeah, when you think about it, I mean, So with that said, is he the injury you're most concerned about, or the absence on the field that you're most concerned about?
Concerned about. That's a good question. Give your answer. I'm going to think about that.
So, I mean, I think you can look at it from several different directions.
It depends on how you're
looking. Yeah, concerned about...
Like from the Eagles' perspective or from the players?
Right. To me, Paul Warlow not being out here when he is in the middle of a major competition is kind of concerning because he did have the knee injury. It's not a great look for him because everybody else is playing well, including TJ Edwards, who made a couple of good plays today, who's also cheaper. The other guy I'm a little concerned about, just in the grand scope of things, is Matt Collins.
Yeah.
This is a guy who...
For both his and the Eagles' sake, really.
Right. I mean, this is a guy who should be the shoe-in for the 5th wide receiver job, and instead, he's off on the side. We don't really understand his groin injury. It's just weird.
That's all we got at this point. It's weird.
And I don't know if it's the Eagles' handling of injuries that I'm not used to, just because I've only been here for the season.
You mean like the lack of updates kind of thing?
No, it's not even the lack of transparency or the lack of updates. It's just the verbiage. And I think the verbiage
Lower body injury.
Yeah, the verbiage is concerning and kind of questionable. Just like his ability to get back on the field. Yeah. So that's a concern.
Yeah. I mean, I think Mack and Mills are the two most concerning ones in terms of like the way their injuries have been weird and stuff. Mm-hmm. Kind of an underrated one who I think the Eagles would benefit from being here, but maybe it's not like the end of the world. I would say is Alshon Jeffrey, just because Carson Wentz didn't work. He and Carson Wentz didn't work out all of last offseason.
Right.
and it was much talked about. We talked about it on the podcast throughout the season. I'm sure Nick Foles and Alshon Jeffrey just have better chemistry, it seemed like, on the field. And I think these offseason reps are going to be very important for, like, it's time for them to take the next step. Like, there's no more excuse. Year 3, Carson Wentz fully healthy. Alshon Jeffrey should be fully healthy.
Yeah.
So whether Jeffrey plays next week in minicamp, it's more important in training camp. If they get all the reps, maybe they throw together in the offseason. I don't know what their plans are. I know Wentz had talked about maybe doing another North Dakota trip. I don't know if that's still going to happen. But especially with, like, Deshaun's here, like, he's a different... You know, it's going to be different for Alshon Jeffrey than it ever has been in terms of how the offense is going to look.
I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
All right, let's run through, like, the position battles real quick before we go, and just, like, where we think they stand as we head into mandatories.
Okay.
We talked a little about corner. It feels like you said, Avante is the slot corner unless they decide he's a safety. I mean, I guess Malcolm's situation will play a lot into that probably. Mm-hmm. You agree with that, right?
Yeah, I think he's the replacement. Yeah. I think he's the long-term replacement anyway. But
Let's talk about wide receiver 5. So I think at this point, I know it's early and things can change, but it seems like Arcega-Whiteside is pretty locked in as the 4th receiver.
Absolutely.
He might be the 3rd by the end of the year, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So then it becomes down to the 5th receiver, and ideally he's a guy... I mean, maybe they keep 6, and more likely they keep 5. Ideally, he's a guy who can help on special teams. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think you and I both see it as Charles Johnson's job to lose, like, at this day. Mm-hmm. I'm not confident whether Mac Hollins either plays at all, or whether he's cut, or whether he starts on PUP. Like, I'm just, like, removing him from the equation until we know what the hell's going on there. And if he's out of the equation, the only other competition really is Shelton Gibson or Braxton Miller, I guess. But they barely even used him, it seems like. So
I think if they keep 6, DeAndre Tompkins is
I keep forgetting about him.
Yeah, he's going to be the 6th guy.
Or, like, returner dominant than receiver guy. Yeah.
Right. I think Charles Johnson's the guy right now. But
the fact that he's getting the first-team reps, I mean, I know he's the only veteran in the room.
Right, but you got to make sure that he can play on special teams.
Yeah.
JJ's going to probably play some on special teams, but you're not going to want to risk him a ton, and I think you do need wide receivers that can gun and do all that stuff. There's really not been a guy who's really taken the brass ring and grabbed...
it's not like Johnson's been amazing, by the way. He's just
Sheldon
the leader
Gibson
in the
has been Sheldon Gibson.
Yeah.
DeAndre Tompkins...
Right as I'm sitting here this day, I'd be surprised if Shelton Gibson was on this team
yes,
on day
I
one.
agree with that.
Maybe he goes on the practice. Or does he have eligibility still?
No.
No, he doesn't? Okay.
No.
So, no, never mind. 3rd safety is pretty interesting. I would say, the guys that have been in camp are Andrew Sendejo, DeAndre Hall, Godwin Igwebuike, Countess and Trey Sullivan. Countess didn't practice today. I think Sullivan's the safest bet to make the team out of the group. Sendejo, I lean a little more towards him making it, though I still don't think it's like 100% by any means, because I think the comp pick thing is a real thing. And then DeAndre Hall has really climbed up the power rankings of that position. Like he I don't know if he'll play on defense necessarily, but if he can show the athleticism he has really long arms, he's tall, like he has the physical and athletic traits that you want. He's like an intriguing prospect in theory. So if I was like predicting what the safety group would look like right now, I'd say Jenkins, McLeod, Sullivan, Sendejo, and DeAndre Hall with Countess. I don't know. He hasn't really shown that much yet. I know it's really early. I know they like him a lot, but he's not I don't think he's a lock to make the team necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Hall and Countess competing for that final spot for sure. If Sendejo,
unless they cut Sendejo, then they maybe both make it. Yeah.
Which I think Countess is more of a threat to Sendejo just from a special teams standpoint. There's always been a safety who's been a focal point of their special teams. Yeah. So that's a thing. So what else you got?
And then I guess the main other one probably 4th running back, which we touched on a little bit. Mm-hmm. Not really sure who would even be the leader right now. I think it's too early to even say.
It's tough with Miles Sanders and Corey Clement not here.
And I mean the other guys haven't shown really anything. I mean, maybe there's some weird world where they bring Ajayi back on a cheap deal. Like, I don't know. I don't see that happening.
It's tough because he doesn't play special teams.
I agree. I mean, Sproles would be the guy they would bring in if anybody, probably.
Probably.
And he'd be an upgrade over their 4th guys right now. I don't think Boston Scott ultimately makes the team. You and I are both higher on Josh Adams than everybody else.
I think
he hasn't really practiced all that much in front of us. Mm-hmm. So I don't really have a read on that, honestly.
Well, I mean, he's coming off labrum surgery.
I don't mean him. I mean the position. I don't really have a read on it.
I think it's too. You can't really evaluate running backs without contact. It's kind of the same thing with linebackers. It's really tough to evaluate safeties without contact because so much of their job involves contact. Just like offensive linemen. I mean, I think the offensive line group behind the starters and Wisniewski and Dillard is pretty wide open as well. So, there should be some decent battles.
Yeah, and the other one would be the fourth defensive end job. Shiv Miller had a good day on Monday, but he's still a little raw. Josh Sweat, early in camp, Deshaun Hall was impressing me, but I haven't really seen that much from him since. Osman hasn't really done that much. I mean, he's had some pressure, but he's just a practice squad guy in reality, unfortunately, for all the Joe Osman heads out there.
Yeah, he was on the second team defense, but he didn't really do much. I think it's Josh Sweat's job to lose.
Yeah. All right, well, before we go, I'll end on, I always tell people to comment, so I'd be remiss if I didn't read some of the comments at least. There's some funny ones in here. So I talked about last week how Deshaun Jackson was bringing swagger back to the Eagles. Alexander Pittman said, no one is bringing swagger back. Nobody has uttered that word since 2008.
That's not true.
That sounds like something I would say to you, like after you say a phrase. Like that sounds like our relationship. Mo said, I hate these kind of videos. No face. Forget it. Bye. She wants to see our faces for some reason.
I mean, actually, technically, our faces.
Yeah, the picture of our faces.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't like what you see right there, then you don't want to see a full video of us.
Yeah, trust me, you don't.
I have a face for radio, is what I like to say.
I would agree with that. Not about me. I'm wonderful, but
an actual question here instead of a criticism. Okay. Bradham, Zach Brown, Camus, LJ Ford, Warlow, and TJ Edwards are the 6 linebackers on the 53 question mark. He left Gary out of there.
Repeat that one again.
So basically, he's asking who are the 6 linebackers going to be, and he had this is Schulier, Allen. He had Bradham, Brown, Camus, Fort, Warlow, Edwards, and then he said maybe Alfieri to the practice squad. So he has Gary getting cut.
Yeah, I think it's either Edwards or Gary.
Yeah, Edwards has looked pretty good, by the way.
Yeah, he has. I
from
think
what we can
they're
see,
positioning Gary pretty well. I would be really surprised unless he completely bombs training camp. If he's not in contention for a roster spot.
Yeah. All right. We'll end on that note. We'll be back next week during mandatory minicamp. Not sure how many we'll do. Not every day or anything like that. We're not insane. But we're at 1 or 2 next week. And then we'll be off for a month and a half from Eagle stuff. I mean, we'll still do some pods throughout the summer. But thanks for listening, guys. Leave some more comments. Ask some questions. Write reviews. Follow us. Read our stuff at NJ.com. Thanks for listening.